Well, having understood structuralism, post-structuralism, now we shall go ahead with the first critic described in a syllabus. That is Tzvetan Todorov. You can see the picture, the image of Todorov here. He was a philosopher, literary theorist, and historian of ideas. Tzvetan Todorov was born on March 1, means 1st March 1939 in Sofia of Bulgaria. His father's name was Todor Borov Todorov. He was a university professor. Okay, and his mother was Haritina Todorova. She was a librarian. After taking his MA in philosophy at the University of Sofia in 1963, he emigrated to France and he enrolled himself at the University of Paris for his PhD. He worked under Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes supervised his doctoral thesis, and his thesis was published in the year 1967 as Literature et Signification. That is the French title, means literature and meaning. Now let's try to understand some of his works. Todorov took his doctoral thesis, doctoral degree, D Trichis cycle, which is equivalent to the PhD, in 1966. Later, he took his doctorate, S. Letters, means Doctors of Letters, you might know him, Doctor of Letters, in 1970. After that, he was appointed to the post as a Director of Research at the French Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Paris in the year 1968. He taught there. He started in teaching in 1968 and he taught there throughout his academic career. He didn't leave the place. But he also taught widely in the English-speaking world, notably at Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and University of California, Berkeley, etc. In 1970, he helped to found the journal Poetic, of which he remained one of the managing editors until 1979. Now, he also worked with one more post-structuralist, that is Gerard Genit. With Gerard Genit, he edited the collection Poetic, which is a series of books on literary theory, published by Editions de Seul until 1987. And he has written many books as well. Although his work is clear, systematic, and analytically very powerful, vigorous, his approach, theoretical approach, stance, shifted radically over the years from that of a scientist to that of a humanist and moralist. Initially, he had a scientific stance, and it changed gradually over the years, and he became a humanist and moralist more. And he also moved from a consideration of only literature to a wider evaluation of social reality and morality. Means he went beyond that. He didn't delimit himself to literature for understanding social reality and morality. His early work, we refer to the books that he has published. It begins with literature at signification, the published version of his doctoral thesis in the year 1967. Okay. During this period, no, from 1967 to late 1970s, he aspired to be, scientific in his approach. He was the most representative of the French structuralist literary theoreticians, and his reputation as a moral philosopher, stemmed largely from his latter works. Okay, the works that he published in the latter part of his life, which include Facing the Extreme, Moral Life in the Concentration Camps. He frequently discussed the opposition between poetics. You are familiar with poetics, Aristotle's term, which is the study of the general laws of literature, and what he variously called description, interpretation, commentary, criticism, and exegesis. So he discussed this opposition between poetics and all these, means description, interpretation, commentary, criticism, and exegesis. Exegesis means the study from various perspectives of the individual literary work. So he discusses all these things. He recognized the value of all these activities, means the activities like description, interpretation, commentary, criticism, etc. But like most of the French structuralists, he was primarily a poetician rather than an exegete. Exegete means, I told you, one who studies exegetes, the study from various perspectives. He was less interested in this, and more interested in poetics. And he observed that one sense of structuralism is the study of abstract structure. Structuralism is interested in what? Lang, in infrastructure. Okay, in synchronic. Now, as you know, the first part of the binary opposition we understood, signifier. So poetics he defines, by in the context of structuralism in this broad sense, because the object of poetics is an abstract structure to understand the general laws of literature. Despite this, his work was also structuralist in a narrower sense as well. Okay, so in literature and its theorist, one of his books, he said that he refers to a Canadian critic, Northrop Frye, and his work Anatomy of Criticism. He talks about this work, which was published in the year 1957, that Anatomy of Criticism by Frye is structuralist in that it combines two traits. This is a structuralist approach because it combines two aspects: an internal approach to literature and a systematic attitude. Therefore, he thinks that Frye's Anatomy of Criticism is structuralist essentially. In the fantastic, however, the work actually, he judged Frye's theory to be insufficiently internal and systematic. Initially, he said there are two traits in Frye's work, but it is insufficient. It is insufficiently internal and systematic because the categories that make up Frye's classificatory scheme were all borrowed from philosophy, psychology, or a social ethic, not from structuralism, linguistic structuralism. And Frye did not indicate that he used these categories in special literary senses. Therefore, all these fields led us outside of literature. Frye took us outside literature. That's what he believed. So for Todorov, to take an internal approach to literature is to try to understand literature as constituted by its own categories. means studying the deeper structure, the general laws, the theory. And this is what he says, to understand literature as constituted by its own categories and the relations between those categories. Now, what distinguishes Todorov's work from other internal systematic theories of literature is its heavy reliance on structural linguistics. So he relies on Saussure's linguistics and on semiotics. Semiotics is the study of signs. So he relies on these for his sources, for the basic categories to describe the systems of literature. So this is how we understand Todorov and his works. Okay, we are going to study an essay, structural analysis of narrative by Todorov. We shall start it with it in tomorrow's lecture.